Hey guys, we are going to be talking to you about Chapter 7, the cultural divide, and connecting working class and ethnic minority students and families to schools. Okay, so in the introduction, it talked a lot about the majority of high school dropouts are minority students, and we found some statistics that I thought were really startling, so I put those on there for you guys to check out. Another thing, if they can succeed in school, it really helps them in their future. So making them successful in our school system really would help them out. Let me move this over too far. So the working class, when they group up, they are very tight knit groups, and they group up because of shared beliefs or shared practices and values. And then the dominant culture is always going to be the culture that's in power. So the dominant culture in a school might be a white male culture because that's usually the one that was in power. However, cultural proficiency is when educators utilize culture and connect it to engage students. Then there are four different types of capital. Cultural capital is going to be social classes, common tastes, like how you dress. Human capital is going to be more of abilities, if you're musically talented or you're artistic. Institutional is going to be how you are expected to act in an institution. And then social capital is going to be your social network. Habitus is what our students are coming to us with from their home life. So any permanent system that they believe from home. For race and parents and family, working class parents want to be involved, but not necessarily know how always. And some of these working class parents don't always know how to put their children into organized activities or don't know where to sign them up. So they are missing out on that. Whereas other parents will put their children in dance or sports and such. Also, schools with the highest success are able to empower their parents, their working class parents, and bring them into the school as resources. Street culture was a big one in this chapter, and sometimes acting out in class happens because these students feel that these gang members that they are around are the ultimate authority and not educators. So they come in and act out because these people have told them school is not fun or not cool. So they are simply acting out because that's what they have been taught culturally is correct. So changing that when minority students are placed into classes with majority students, sometimes there is a border or an obstacle there. And it's not always teacher imposed, sometimes it's peer imposed. And then teachers really need to be assessing their own biases, and we'll get to that more in the conclusion. But communication. Sometimes your students communicate to you in the ways that they have learned at home, and sometimes that's not always what we expect. We've talked about eye contact and things we've learned, or movements. So African American and Latino students will move a lot in class and respond loudly, where a lot of times in school you're supposed to be silent and wait for the teacher to address you. Sometimes different cultures, that's just not the way that they learn.
And the school actually plays a huge role in this as well. And I think that's something that we're learning more about as we go. But the school is responsible for educating the parents and students about preparing for college, because remember, in some cultures, college is not even a blip on the radar. And so it's really important for the school to foster that sort of discipline, as well as to create that sense of belonging for the students. And one quote that I found that I thought was really impactful was, "The sense of belonging is the difference maker between success and failure." And so there's a lot of different things in place to kind of help involve the students, whether it's through peer relationships, a peer mentor program, or connecting that student with an adult that they can trust, an adult that they can talk to. And also, they made an interesting point that if the parents are not involved, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not interested or that they don't care. It just may not be something that they feel welcome to do because they haven't been invited by the school. Um, Learning communities are another way of involving the students and families to feel supported, to feel included. And this helps to increase the engagement in the school, and they eventually show academic and attendance improvement and start to engage in extracurricular activities. It's important to have culturally proficient educators, like Leah was saying, because they can help recognize when a student is different or when they might be struggling to fit in, and also have strategies for including them in the curriculum, in the activities, or in the student groups available at the school. Also, it's important for the student and their family to see a connection between the curriculum and what's happening after high school. Because if they don't see a reason for learning something, how it will affect their job performance, how it will affect their entrance into college, then they won't see the reasoning for doing it or for applying themselves. So, really making a concerted effort to explain the importance of the curriculum and how it relates to life after school is important. Um, the extracurricular activities also foster a sense of belonging, and they allow the students to feel more engaged with their peers. And also, making a safe space is important, because if schools do not create positive spaces for these students, they will create alternate spaces that are less safe and less productive. And so, ensuring that these classes remain heterogeneous in terms of race and ethnicity and gender, so that everyone feels involved, is going to be a huge responsibility for the school in terms of maintaining that. And then when students feel their identities are not being valued, or if they're being misunderstood, they're more likely to resist authority and misbehave in class because they don't feel understood or valued. Um, Schools must proactively then address these incidents of rebellion and racial incidents as a community, rather than dismiss them as acts of individuals. And I think we kind of touched on that sometimes in our discussion of when we had to remove a kid from class or whatever. But these need to be viewed as collective ideals and not as individual behavior incidents. If educators hope to succeed academically, then they need to value the community that lives and breathes within their school system and within their surrounding area. The disparity in academic success is not caused by innate lack of ability, but a reflection of the different cultures that make up that school system. So, in conclusion, we just wanted to reiterate a few things that we would like to see applied to our own classrooms and our own teaching situations. But number one is that educators must lead and embody the principles of cultural proficiency, which means that we are the example of what needs to be done. Teachers should need to focus on what the student, not what they've done wrong, but what they can do differently to help meet the student's needs. And lastly, teachers should be aware of their own biases in terms of culture and cultural differences, and use those as strengths and not divisions.
Thanks.